I noticed that there's a lot of details within the perception line that link directly to Chinese culture and heritage. And then I noticed that when you reveal the rotor, you can see the balance spring, and it resembles like the ball in the lion's mouth. I was like, what would be one cool mythical character to see on Atelier Wen? And then the character that came to mind was Sun Wukong, the Monkey King. Can I show you a mock-up I did?
Show me.
This is kind of embarrassing. I'm sitting here today with Robin, one of the co-founders of Atelier Wen. What's going on, Robin?
Hey, thanks a lot for having me today. Super happy to be with you in your brand new studio.
He's actually the first guest for me to interview in this new studio, and this new studio is at our new store at Carrot & Co. So the reason why we're sitting down today is because we're doing a pop-up with Atelier Wen. Carrot & Co is hosting an Atelier Wen pop-up today, Sunday, May 18th in Flushing, New York. Is this your first time in Flushing?
Yeah. I haven't really explored a lot of New York. Honestly, every time I go, I just go to the very same places. But yeah, it's my first time coming here and it looks super nice.
I'll give you a little brief history about what Flushing is. So Flushing is one of the largest Chinatowns in the United States.
Oh, wow.
And outside of Manhattan. The street that our store is on, Main Street, it's the second busiest street after Times Square.
Really?
If you walk 2 blocks up where our old store was, you will see it's like crazy packed there. The other things around us, we're near Citi Field where the Mets play, Arthur Ashe Stadium where the US Open is. We're like 5 minutes from those, as well as LaGuardia Airport. So we're like a hub of where people are just coming in and out of our town all the time. My family has built like their store here. We've been here for about 30 plus years. And then my parents built their business, 40 plus years ago. And then me and then my sister, Tiffany, you met, we're the second generation of Carrot & Co. who's, passionate about watches. Before we kind of jump into some of the watches and stuff, I actually watched several YouTube videos last night about you talking with other people. And I was like, what angle can I talk to you about that's different and original? And one thing that I didn't see many people talk about, and I think that you would probably like to talk about too, is like, I noticed that there's a lot of details within the perception line that link directly to Chinese culture and heritage. I love hearing backstories about that kind of stuff. But before I ask you about that, I want to know, who are you? Like, who is Robin? How did you get into horology? Like, what was that whole thing?
Yeah, no, of course. So, I mean, I'm Robin, this, I founded Atelier Wen in 2018, but before that, I mean, Atelier Wen at the beginning was really a purely personal project, if I may. That was sort of the result of my passion for watches. So I started being interested in watches when I turned 14, because back then for my birthday my parents gave me a nice Seiko. It was like a quartz chronograph, and that sort of triggered something inside me. Then I started looking online for watches. I discovered forums, and very quickly, like reading those opinions and those posts on the forums, I was convinced that I needed an automatic watch or a mechanical, like hand winding watch, because that seemed to be what true watches were. And I mean, obviously that's a wrong statement, but still, like I was 14 and I was like, oh, I need that. So I went to my dad and I asked him to buy me a Tissot. I don't exactly remember which one it was, but I think it's the one that had like the semi sort of like guilloche texture dial anyway. And obviously he said no. But I still really wanted a mechanical watch. And reading at those forums, I saw people talking about vintage Chinese mechanical watches and saying how they were like super high quality, because back then in China, you needed maybe years of savings to buy those watches. They were meant to last a lifetime, to be really robust, really precise. And I thought, that's like super fascinating. And the good thing is that they were really affordable. Maybe for like 100 yuan, you could get a nice new old stock Shanghai, because it was all overly produced. Like it was, in this kind of like mass sort of like planned economy, like they made way too many of them. And my parents were going to China often, so I was lucky. Sometimes I would go with them, and I bought 1, 2, 3, a lot of those vintage Chinese watches, and I started posting about that online, buying more. I mean, I'm not sure you could call that a collection or hoarding, but I had a lot. And when I was in uni, I sort of had this lucky moment wherein I did an exchange in Beijing, in Peking University. I befriended the head of the Chinese Chamber of Watchmaking, so the body that kind of like regulates and oversees like anything that relates to watches in China, be it on the selling side, on the making side. And this guy like kind of became my mentor. His name is Huiwen, and he took me under his wing. And for 1 year, we went to visit like a lot of players in the field, be it like movement makers. So he took me to Seagull, which back then was a huge dream for me, because it's like I really love like Seagull, and you can't really enter a factory like that in China. So he took me there and I could see everything. That was amazing. But we also went to see dial makers, enamel makers, independent watchmakers, you know, like people like Tanzer Juan Masushu, who today are AHCI members. Back then they were not, and we still went to visit their workshop. That was amazing. But that's sort of like got like into myself the idea of obviously that there's quality, but the sense I could get when talking with those people is that we could connect over the passion. You know, I was passionate about those Chinese watches, those products, and turns out that the people who were making them were also equally passionate about what they were doing too. And I thought that's pretty cool, and that's not really an angle or an aspect that you hear so often about. And that's when really I got that idea of like, you know, it could be nice to make a watch brand that's like proudly made in China that kind of sort of share the spotlight on this piece besides just quality, but also this passion. And Wilfried, my co-founder, he's born and raised in Hong Kong, lived most of his life between Hong Kong and Beijing. So he also felt strongly himself about popularizing Chinese culture, because to him, that's something that he really enjoyed. But he realized that most people around him had no clues about it and had very sort of like negative biases around that, saying, oh, there's no culture, it's all like copycat and fakes, which is awfully wrong. So he was like, oh yeah, that could be nice, you know, to make watches that show that it can be original and that introduce a lot of people to the depth and richness of Chinese culture. And that's how we got started. We got started together. But yeah, at the beginning for me, it was really my sort of nerdy passion for vintage Chinese watches.
Wow. I think that's like the most original origin story I've ever heard, because most people, including myself, like we all go into Swiss first. Like you were mentioning the Tissot. Yeah. But like, okay, started from Seiko and then it went straight to like Chinese vintage watches and then just went down the rabbit hole from there. Where does the name Atelier Wen come from? Like why is that the name?
Yeah. So initially we hesitated between a lot of names, but we realized that the mission of the brand was really all about Chinese culture. Yeah. So we used the word Wen, like Wenhua, for the culture. Yeah. But then we thought it would be a bit weird to name the watch brand Wen, because Wilfried and myself we're not Chinese, and the team is sort of like French and Chinese. So we thought we wanted a name that would really reflect our identity, our sort of like cultural bridge standing, and that's why we went for Atelier Wen. So Atelier is the French for workshop, and that sort of also echoes to our own like French identity, because despite the fact that Wilfried was born and raised in Hong Kong, like he's like French. So yeah, we wanted really a name that could show to people who we are. And also we like the meaning of atelier, because a workshop, you know, is fairly unpretentious. It's small, it's a place where you can try stuff. It's not like the manufacture or the maison or like those kind of like, you know, big established buildings. And I think it's a bit more humble, a bit more nimble, a bit more like geared towards experimentation.
Yesterday I was having lunch with some of my uncles on my wife's side, like my Titos. And I was explaining Atelier Wen to them because they're also watch collectors. Yeah. Their first reaction was like, oh, so they can make like hundreds of these, right? And I'm like, no, that's not it at all. Like this is independent watchmaking. And I just thought it was kind of cool that you mentioned the atelier part where it's like a small workshop. And like now I can really envision that part. I want to talk about the Perception line because I know we have several models here. So I'm going to pull one up. So I'm holding two of the Perception watches here. When I watch a lot of YouTube reviews about your guys' watches, I know a lot of people are like, this Chinese luxury watch is $3,500. What makes it this and that? And then they talk about the finishing, but then I feel like they miss so many details still. So I'm going to name a few details that I found, and I want to hear the backstory behind them. So the first thing I noticed is the minute track has been replaced with what's called a Huiwen pattern. So when I was growing up, my grandma would make us like Chinese food. And so she would put it in the bowls, and a lot of the bowls would have this like kind of pattern design. So what made you guys choose this little design on the minute track?
Actually, like the Huiwen pattern, it's something that does like date back our very first collection, which was called Porcelain Odyssey. So Porcelain Odyssey, as the name may imply, was a watch with like a porcelain dial, and we sort of went for like 40s, 50s aesthetics. The reason why we went for this aesthetics in the Porcelain Odyssey is that when we started the brand and we wanted our first watch to be sort of a watch that go back to the times the very first Chinese watches were made, and would ask the question, what could it have been had like a focus on craft be chosen? So the very first watch in China was made in Tianjin in 1955. So we were like, okay, we need to have those kind of like 40s, 50s aesthetics. And we realized that in a lot of the watches of this time, they had like a chemin de fer in French, like a rail track, I guess, in English. So we thought we needed to have one on the dial, but then we wondered about like how we could maybe make it a bit more ours. And we didn't really find out until Wilfried went on a trip to Seoul. And in Seoul, he went to an art museum. Yeah, in Korea.
Oh, wow.
And in this art museum, like they had a section about like Chinese art. And one day he just sent me a picture of like a lacquer box with like the Huiwen pattern. And he was like, oh, it's super interesting how like regular each interval is. And you could think that there's some kind of like strokes that looks like markings. And he was like, yeah, maybe this could be like a good like a rail track. Maybe we could see about how we could adapt it. So we decided to do that for Porcelain Odyssey. And that's a detail that a lot of people really like. They were like, I can see the functional use. I can see like what you're trying to do and which sort of like traditional element of the watch you're having here. But I can also see like how it's like deeply culturally relevant. So yeah, we decided to make that like one of our signature elements. And for Perception, we therefore tweaked a bit the pattern so that it could match the format of Perception.
That is such a cool detail. Like as soon as I saw it, I was like, wow, that feels like home. It's something that was so unconscious for me. Another detail I noticed is that on the case back, obviously everyone knows that there's a lion's engraving. So when I was a kid, this parking garage we would always park at had these guardian lion statues outside. And inside the lion's mouth has a carved ball. It's like a cool way because the ball is made of the same stone from the lion, and it was made in a way where it was carved in the mouth and it cannot be removed. And then I noticed that when you reveal the rotor, you can see the balance spring, and it resembles like the ball in the lion's mouth. So I want to know like what was like kind of the thought process of doing this. I feel like it's so intentional because you specifically have to have the ball in the mouth.
It is. So I mean, initially, so we had some thinking about like what to make of the Caseback. Personally, I don't like display Casebacks. I like solid Casebacks. I mean, it's not that I dislike display Caseback, but I feel a lot of the movements that you see in a lot of watches, while they are great movements, they are maybe not that visually interesting. You know, maybe they are like movements that you find in a lot of watches with like very sort of like minimal finishing and decoration. And I always feel, is it really useful to show such a movement? Or could we maybe deliver a bit more value by having something really intricate on the Caseback? So the first watch, the Porcelain Odyssey, again, like it had an ETA clone. And to me, there was absolutely no use in showing that. So we had like a full solid Caseback that was really cool. When we were doing this, like developing Perception, I also wanted to do full solid Caseback. But the feedback we got from the owners of the porcelain pieces was that they didn't care so much about how the movement may or may not be finished. It's just like the idea of seeing something in movement, of seeing like something that make the mechanical identity of the watch like more visible and prominent. So I heard it and I decided that maybe we could sort of like meet in the middle and not do like full display and not do full solid, but instead do something that is like semi display. We thought a lot, about what could we do. I like the idea of having a mythical creature because that's something we did with the first watch, and I thought that was pretty cool. Also maybe a bit more bold in the aesthetics, but because it's not something that is on the dial, I think you can afford to be a bit more playful. It's really only for you. And because this watch is inspired by architecture, like in how we build the dial, in how we shape the case and whatnot, I thought, well, you know what's the mythical creature you find in any major buildings in China? It's always the guardian lion. At the entrance you see them. And I was like, oh, actually it's funny because this is a bit the entrance of the watch, like you get inside, you see the movement, you see everything. So we thought it made sense. And actually Wilfried is the one who had the idea of like holding the ball in the mouth, because when we were playing with like the drawings of like that garden lion, we had it of different size. At some point he had teeth, no teeth. But then we realized that, we realized that actually we could see quite a bit of the escapement if we were just to position it in such a way that like his nose would be right above the window. It would feel like he's holding the ball in his mouth, and we're like, oh, that's actually a very cool small detail that most people will never notice, but that sort of adds a bit more like cultural depth and relevance. And in a way, it maybe really makes it like a kind of lucky charm, it's like you do have the very auspicious good fortune kind of like lion holding the ball.
You guys did such a great job with it. It's even cool that the sapphire crystal is shaped in the shape of a mouth, which I've never seen sapphire crystal in this kind of particular shape. Like I know when Cartier does their sapphire crystal glass, they're always different sizes. There's like slightly round, and it's hard to do that. And then to have this specifically in this mouth shape is really incredible. Another way I interpreted the guardian lion is that like Atelier Wen is like the the guardians of like Chinese horology, because outside of you guys, I don't think there's anyone else who's like celebrating horology within China.
No, I mean, that's a very nice compliment. I think there are some others who are also doing it. I mean, we all have different angles. You have Berens, who's like maybe a bit more focusing on movement and functionalities. And even like the big sort of old brands like Seagull, Shanghai, Peacock, they are doing efforts to make nicer and nicer watches. But yeah, we really hope also, we can maybe inspire others, because I think at the end of the day, we're not all fighting for the same pie. It's anyways currently such a small pie that it can only be grown. So if there are like more brands, more actors who come and who make Chinese watchmaking like more of a visible thing, and I believe at the end of the day we will all benefit, and the ecosystem as a whole, will also benefit. Like maybe then there'll be more demand for craftsmen, so people will be more inclined to like pursue crafts, keep the traditions, keep the heritage.
Another detail I noticed is the Atelier Wen logo. It's like in a circle and then it has these lines.
Yeah.
I feel like I've seen it before, but could you tell me like what's the inspiration behind the logo?
Yeah,
I see it's on the clasp as well.
Yeah, so for the logos, essentially it's one character that has been redrawn, but it has been redrawn in such a way that's meant to allude to like the concept of a kunpeng. So kunpeng is like a mythical creature which is half a fish and half a bird. And the idea behind kunpeng is that it's an allegory of the concept of yin and yang. At first glance, you may say that, a fish and a bird, that's not possible for one entity to be both, right? Because they are very different. The fish is in the water, the bird is in the sky. And of course, you have flying fishes, but I don't think they thought this far when they came up with the concept. Yeah, so you may think it's impossible to do both, but the thing with the kunpeng myth is that it invites you to maybe take a step back and not pay so much attention to purely visual dichotomies, but see that if you think a bit deeper, then maybe it can be one thing, it can be a whole. And Wilfred and I, we really like this concept because when we were starting the brand, we were like two French guys saying we're gonna make Chinese watches, and a lot of people were like, but it's not the same thing, right? You're French, why don't you do French watches? You're not Chinese, like it's so different, and why are you doing that? And then like the message we wanted to tell them is like, maybe don't pay so much attention to that. Take a step back, have a look at the watches, and you'll be able to see how hopefully they can make sense to you. And so we really like that myth, and like when we had the one character redrawn, we thought it was pretty fun to make echo to that. So I mean, it's a simplified bird. You can see you have this sort of like V shape, and then like fish, like as if it's drawn a bit by a kid, but yeah.
I can see the fish. Yeah, it's like that like logo. Now I can visualize it. And then the bird one, it takes me a second to kind of see it, but when I see it, like my eyes are locked onto it.
And then also we frame the whole a bit as a seal, like a round seal, so that like there's also format-wise a bit of an allusion to something that's quite Chinese.
I mean, one of the placements you put the logo is on the clasp, which leads directly to the micro adjustment. For some reason, collectors online, and I guess myself included in some ways, we're crazy about having a micro adjustment on our watch.
It's so important, like especially I think in a city like New York, where it's super cold in the winter, it's hot in the summer. I mean, you don't want to be like resizing your bracelet. I think even like twice a year, it's a bit annoying. You have to take out the tools, remove links, add links. And for us, the need was even more stringent, because when we were living in Hong Kong, you would be inside a building, and inside the building the AC is super strong, it's very cold, it's very dry. I think your wrist shrinks, and then you go out, it's like 100% humidity, 35 degrees Celsius, your wrist gets super swollen. It's impossible to wear a bracelet watch in Hong Kong. It's like you make it loose enough to go outside, and when you're inside it just goes up down your wrist, or you size it so that when you're inside it's okay, but then like when you're outside in the street, it feels you have those high security like tracking bracelet that they give to inmates, like the thing that's super tight and you can't remove. So we were like, it would be nice to have such a feature and to have it like very very handy on the fly. Just press the button and you can easily like adjust by half a link.
No, that's definitely needed. Is there any details that you want to mention about the perception line that I didn't talk about? Like any other cool, fun Easter eggs?
So, I mean, there are like functional things and like design stuff. I think functional ones, the one that I really like is the telescopic blades. This one is not activated by a button, but it's just like you can here. You need to pull and then you can like put it back again. We didn't always have that, but we realized that a lot of our customers have small wrist. And when they remove too many links, because, well, the wrists are small, then like the blades, they sort of like hit against the links, and it makes the bracelet very rigid and uncomfortable. So we wondered about how we could make the blade shorter. But the issue is that if you make the blade shorter, then it's kind of hard to put on and remove the watch. So we saw that system on like 70s Cartier, and we're like, oh, it's really neat actually, because you can still have the same like length for the blades when they are like fully extended. But at the same time, when it's closed, it's much more comfortable on the wrist.
I did not even catch that. That's a really incredible one. You mentioned Cartier. The one that came to mind too is Omega Constellation.
Yes,
the
they did that.
Ones,
Huiwen did that. GP did that. But I don't know why they all like stopped doing this thing. That was a really nice feature.
I think most modern watches, like what they do is to do a butterfly clasp. So they'll just like fold over one side, and that's like their new version of having like this slider.
Maybe.
To kind of expand it. I did not even notice that. Like if you didn't tell me that, that's probably something, if I owned this watch, this is something I would like notice like 6 months later after owning it, like, oh wow, I didn't know it had this feature. Last thing I want to know about this watch, can you tell me, actually there's a few things, the dial too. So it's made by a master guilloche.
Yes,
yeah.
Master Chang. So Master Chang is the first and for some time was the only like guilloche master craftsman in China. Now there are some others. So in his workshop, he has 2 more master guilloches. He also has apprentices that he's training so that eventually they can also become master in their own right. But Master Chang is a very, very interesting character. He's really an extreme person. I think we meet a lot of extreme persons through Atelier Wen, but he's like, I think in the top 5 of the most extreme people we've ever met. So he's fully self-taught. That's really nice. And he doesn't come from a craft background or any sort of relevant background.
So he didn't come from watches too?
No, not at all. And he doesn't come from wealth either. You know, it's not like, someone really rich who had the money and the leisure to pursue some nice art. He comes from a poor family. I think he dropped out of school like when he made it to middle school. Then he went to work as a, Mingong, in a bunch of factories around the country.
Yeah.
Eventually, he secured an apprenticeship to become a sort of like machinist. He did that, and he found like a stable-ish job. But that I think he was like 30 when eventually he found like a decent-ish like manufacturing job, and it's a big-ish. And then one day, a friend of his like showed him an old Russian cigarette box that had guilloche, and he really loved it, and he was obsessed by it, and he decided to drop everything to become the first one to do that in China. But of course, he had no idea how to do it, and you don't really improvise guilloche. That there's some tools that are called rose engines that are very complex, that are not being made anymore.
Thing
yes,
you have to turn.
Exactly. Yeah. With like rosettes which are those like very like wide brass wheels that has sort of like different patterns, and that will guide the cutting tool into like different sub patterns. So he didn't have this machine, and this machine is not made anymore. The ones who still do guilloche in Switzerland, they buy machines that are more than 100 years old.
Yeah.
They're also insanely expensive. They don't leave the country. So he decided to build his own, but he doesn't speak English, so he couldn't look online as to how like people in Europe do it. He didn't really know how to use internet back then, so he just figured it out himself. And that's what I find is really impressive, is that it was all in his head. And it took him some time to do the machine. Like initially it didn't work, and then it worked a bit, and then it worked better. But in China he got a patent for it because it's pretty different.
Wow.
And he did it. And that's what I find like to be so amazing, is that it's a guy who was just so much in love with something that he dropped everything. He tried hard, and eventually he found how to do it. And it's highly unreasonable. I honestly don't recommend anyone to do that, and I guess I would never do that. Like you're in a nice and stable situation, and then you do something that is honestly weird, that you have no idea how to do it, but he did it and he succeeded, and I think that's amazing. Then he went into like this TV show in China, like the US Have Talent, so like those kind of
America's
like
Got Talent.
Yeah. Okay. In France, it's like France has an incredible talent. Like we have incredible. Anyhow, so he went on to the Chinese version of that. Then he received like a prize from the president of China himself. He went from being like a poor kid in the Henan countryside to a Mingong, to suddenly dropping everything, to then like having this like wide acclaim on TV and receiving a prize from the president. I don't know, that there's something that I find is really impressive, and it shows really the the value of grit and perseverance.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm really admirative because I wouldn't be able to achieve 5% of what he's done. It's pretty cool. And now his obsession is to actually like train as many future guilloche masters as possible. Because initially he didn't want just this thing to be, you know, him and then when he stops. So he wanted to have like an actual like generation of guilloche master, but now he wants actually to have the biggest one in the world. So his thing is that he wants to train as many people as possible so that the center for guilloche then becomes like his workshop in China.
Wow.
He's really impressive. He's an actual genius. Yeah.
I'm going to start wrapping things up because we actually got to get to our events
No,
in like the next couple of minutes. Is there anything else you want to mention about Atelier Wen, the brand? Any watches coming up?
Cool? No,
yeah.
I guess that's why we're also here today. I mean, we're showing Perception, but we're showing the new ones as well. It's a big year for us, I feel, because since 2022 we've had Perception and Perception only. This year we're not releasing one new collection but two new collections, which are quite different from what we've done. They're quite different in terms of like aesthetic positioning. So we try to bring one new series. There's very little overlap with Perception, but they're also different in terms of like ambition, if I may. We're trying to step things up. We feel that, you know, if we really want to achieve our objective of like celebrating Chinese craftsmanship and culture per se, we really need to have flagship watches that make a huge like statement and impact and are noticed and are not just like, oh yeah, good watches for China, but are just like great watches, full stop. So yeah, we're trying to like step things up in terms of execution and ambition. We've been telling a lot of people we've been working on Tantalum since 2022. We've shown prototypes, we've shown a micro series with Grail Watch Revolution. This year is the year that we finally release the result of that project, so the full Tantalum series. The cool thing is that the series itself is not going to be a limited edition. There are going to be limited editions within the series, but it's not like, oh, we're not just going to make 5 watches and call it a day. It's really, I think we figured out how to make Tantalum really well and with reasonable sort of like volumes. That's something I'm very excited about, and that's going to be a full Tantalum bracelet, which has not been done like commercially. I mean, we were the first ones to do them commercially, but it was limited, and now it's not going to be limited. There's going to be a lot of polishing. It's going to be really nice. And we're also exploring new crafts. So, because I think a lot of people get the impression that we're the brand about guilloche. I think guilloche has been a huge part of our journey for the past 3 years, but ultimately we want to be known for Chinese craftsmanship. So we're going to be like working with new craftsmen.
So it sounds like you guys already have a lot of things planned. For everyone watching, please stay tuned for what Atelier Wen is going to launch later this year. There's some new watches that we can't discuss today, but you will see it on my channel a little bit later this year as well. I guess the last thing I want to ask you, it's like a bonus thing. Last night, like when I was like thinking about, oh, I'm going to talk to Robin, like I was like, what would be one cool mythical character to see on Atelier Wen? And then the character that came to mind was Sun Wukong, Monkey King. So obviously, can I show you a mock-up?
Show me.
This is kind of embarrassing.
It's pretty nice, honestly. Maybe we should hire you for the Karat & Co special edition. Who knows?
Okay, maybe I shouldn't show it on the screen yet then.
Yeah. Under embargo.
But that's pretty funny.
It's pretty nice.
Thanks for looking at that. But again, Robin, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Really looking forward to the pop-up event we're doing today. And thanks everyone for watching.
Thank you so much.